The Nakba begins, you could say, as early as the founding of Israel, because the Nakba is that catastrophe which allowed the indigenous people of Palestine to lose their land to another people and another power. And plans to colonize Palestine began as early as the 1800s.
Welcome to One in Tribe. I am your host, Julie Fidalgo, and today I have a very special guest with me. Elianne is a Lebanese Canadian writer, lecturer, and content creator who holds a master's in alchemy and Jungian dream analysis and a PhD in Palestinian political identity. She brings academic rigor, cultural awareness, and profound personal insight to guide you through a transformation that is both deeply personal and globally conscious. Welcome, Elianne, to One in Tribe.
Hey, Julie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about this conversation. But before we jump in, I always like to ask my guests if they can describe themselves in 3 words.
Just the first things that are going to come to mind. I'm going to say pregnant, books, and words, I guess.
Okay. Well, congratulations on the baby on the way.
Thank you.
It's very exciting. So, Elianne, before we get into the deep stuff we're going to talk about today, can you just tell me a little bit about where you were born, where you spent your childhood, and just a little bit about your upbringing?
Yeah. I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in Canada, and I was raised there for 12, 13 years. And then we all moved back to my parents' homeland, to Lebanon. And then I spent another 13 years there. After which I moved back to Canada, but to Toronto to continue my doctorate studies. And then I came back. Then I went back to Lebanon after that was done because Canada was borderline unbearable, honestly, especially the winters. I wasn't built for the winter. And yeah, now I'm in Australia. I don't know how I would describe my upbringing, except that your average immigrant experience in North America, where you're taught to speak the mother tongue at home, and if you don't, get smacked across the face, and you live a bit of a double life. You have like your life at school with your friends, and then you have your life at home where you're not the person you are at school. You're uh you're your culture and your food, and there are moments that those two worlds overlap, like when your mom sends food with you to school and it's different than everybody else's PB&Js. Everybody has PB&Js and chips and stuff, and you have like a Tupperware of beans in red sauce with rice and shade, and yeah.
I love that. That's so funny. And I can totally relate. I also spent some years in my childhood in Toronto in Canada, and it is kind of 2 worlds. So yeah, I can totally relate. So, because my intention with this podcast is to build bridges between the East and the West, I try to avoid topics that separate us, which politics and religion, we know, are 2 topics that we should never really discuss because people are just they have very strong opinions about both. But I want you to talk about the Nakba. You are Lebanese. You got your PhD in Palestinian political identity. And I thought you would be a good person to talk about the Nakba for the first time on my podcast. And I want to make it just super Nakba 101, because there are a lot of people that don't know what the Nakba is. So if you can just share.
Yeah, of course. It's no surprise that people don't know in the West what the Nakba is because it didn't happen in the West. It happened in Palestine. It happened in West Asia, or what would be the Middle East to most people in Western Europe and North America. And just as people, we tend to emphasize and zero in on the tragedies that have to do with us specifically and our history, our personal ancestral history. And because it doesn't look like it's closely connected or connected really in any way to North American, Western European, white ancestral history, it doesn't get mentioned the same way, the Japanese and Korean War doesn't get mentioned, or the Japanese occupation of most of East Asia doesn't get mentioned, or anything that doesn't really happen within the major metropoles just doesn't get mentioned. So the Nakba, and I'm not like the biggest fan of this word, by the way, because the Nakba means catastrophe. And to me, it's always given me the sense of like the catastrophe that can now never be undone. Like when a catastrophe happens, you can't undo catastrophe. But we're doing a lot of work to return a certain balance to this place that has been in so much unrest for the last 100 years. So the Nakba, officially happened in 1948. The Nakba kind of coincides with, or overlaps actually, with the founding of the modern state of Israel in 1948. So if let's say, history is here, the Nakba is one perspective of this history, and then the founding of Israel is another perspective of this history. So they're describing the same thing, supposedly, but they just kind of, like, these two contradicting histories overlap. They're on top of one another. But really, the Nakba begins, you could say, as early as the founding of Israel, because the Nakba is that catastrophe which allowed the indigenous people of Palestine to lose their land to another people and another power. And plans to colonize Palestine began as early as the 1800s. And the Zionist movement in Eastern Europe and Russia began around somewhere between 1850 and 1870, and then mass emigrations of European Jews started to happen as early as the 1870s and between the 1870s and the 1890s. And then those immigrations started to intensify in the early 1900s, around between 1914 and 1920, so during World War I. Now, up until now, the indigenous population in Palestine, as these people are flooding in more and more, are still, like, not sure what's going on. Like, at first, they're accepting these people as, people who need refuge, people who are leaving a place where they're being prosecuted and discriminated against. So they're really welcoming everyone who's coming in with opening arms. But then in the early 1940s, when the United States and Britain and other places decide to close their borders to any emigrating Jews to help redirect them towards Palestine as we're building up towards the Holocaust, as the Third Reich is taking power and Hitler is becoming more and more influential around Germany and around Europe in general in political circles. When the U.S. and Britain and these other places start closing their borders, larger groups of European Jews who are now organized into militias are entering with a lot of force, just very, there's not a lot of force, but a lot of force, but also just in large numbers. And by now, by the early 1940s, there are clashes happening in the land. So at this point, we're post-World War I. And what happened after World War I was the Ottoman sultanates fell, and they fell to British, French, Italian, German, etc. powers. Excuse me again. Not German, sorry, because the Germans were actually on the Ottoman side. But anyways, largely French and British powers. Palestine specifically was given to Britain or taken by Britain. And this is all based on a pencil-drawn map called the Sykes-Picot Agreement between these two men, Sykes and Picot, an Englishman and a Frenchman, and who just cut up the Middle East. Now the French took the places with more Christians in them in terms of West Asia. The French sort of took on this Christo-national mission to create some Christian-dominant nations, specifically like Western Syria, Northwestern Syria, Lebanon, which would become Lebanon, while Britain was geared more towards resource optimization, so splitting up or lumping together really Iraq in such a way that all of the biggest oil reserves would be within one set of borders. And they sort of decided that Jerusalem/Palestine would be an international zone, but controlled by the British, right? So you have this British mandate of Palestine that comes into existence. So what was Syria Philistina in the Ottoman Empire, just southwestern Syria, in the Ottoman Empire, became the British mandate of Palestine. Jordan became the Transjordan. Lebanon became Greater Lebanon later on, like Lebanon as a substate in Syria, et cetera, et cetera. So we're in the British Mandate of Palestine. It's the late 1930s/early 1940s. There are more and more tensions growing in the land because the amount of people emigrating are becoming much more numerous, and they're coming armed. They're coming with money. They're coming with weapons. They're coming aggressively. They're pushing people out of lands. They're buying land from absentee landlords and then encroaching on the boundaries of those of the lands, encroaching beyond the boundaries of those lands. And I want to say about 18% of the land that was taken eventually in 1948 was bought. So a lot of it starts with these deals to sell the land by absentee landlords who would be living in Beirut or in Jerusalem, and they'd be approached by people like the Rothschilds, who bought a lot of this, like a big portion of this percentage of bought land. And there was no connection between there was already within Palestinian society, within Palestine, there's this riff between the Falahi or the the peasant population, the farmers population, the farmers who live in the mountains and in the fields and in the more in farming areas, and the people who lived in the city and wealthier bourgeois landowners. So you would have people living on this like massive several thousand acre piece of land, let's say like 20,000 acre piece of land, living on the land, tilling the land, eating from the land, and paying a tax to the landowner based on like everything they produced in terms of crop and what they sold at the market, etc., etc., etc. And the landlord would generally be living somewhere in the city or on the coast, or like I said, in Beirut or Damascus, like in a more prestigious city or place. So there was no connection there. So when these landlords would sell, they wouldn't communicate with the Falahi population. The people on the land would just be chilling one day, and this army of people would come and start just telling them to get off. Like, this is not your land. This land has been sold. Get off. Go. And they have no idea what's going on, and they have no way of contacting their landlords. They obviously try, and that created even more rifts within Palestinian society itself, and this sense of betrayal between the people still living in a more traditional agricultural way and the people who were embracing these new modernized, colonized bourgeois lifestyles. And that's even reflected in like the magazines that were coming out and newspapers. Like there were these revolutionary newspapers around this time circulating where you would have like this manifesto calling people to oppose the Zionists that are encroaching on the land and harassing people. And then on the same page, there would be like an ad for some European car or bikinis, and like the messaging within the article, within the manifesto would often be religious, like there would be religious undertones, whether Christian or Muslim undertones, because that's also that was a large part of the agricultural and Falahi identity. But yeah, so the people, there's this unrest between the people themselves, and but there's also new coalitions forming within Palestine, within both the Falahi communities and the more bourgeois communities. And we start to see in the late 30s uprisings against the British who are there, because the British are also, enabling Zionist violence against the peasant population, the farmer population, and enabling just this like encroaching of like let's say they would take over there was this what is it called, like an administrative centers where they keep records of people, right, like who was born when and when was their birthday, etc., etc. And most of the Falahi population by then still hadn't registered themselves in writing, like, because in the Ottoman Empire there wasn't this passport system. And in its last few decades, the Ottoman Empire tried to modernize and Europeanize by making people register their lands, register themselves, register their children, register their birthdays. Before that, like, you didn't, that's just not how you related. Like, you were born in the season of oranges, or, you were son of someone who worked in something. Like this is how you were known. This is how you were registered, essentially, in the memory of the people around you. But then written registration started to become a thing. But most of the farmer population doesn't read or write, right? When these rules are being implemented. So many of them, just out of pure intimidation, would never go to register themselves. And so when the British and still budding Zionist movement would go through the documentations and everything in these in the administrative spaces in the from the Ottoman Empire and the banks and whatnot, they would simply, like, if something wasn't written correctly, they would throw it away. If someone masalan had missed entering a name of one of their children or a name of one of their grandparents, or just like missed something out of, sheer lack of familiarity with this kind of process, khalas, anything they had, any claim they had to any money, to any property, to any existence, really was thrown in the trash. And they kind of just use this to facilitate, like, losing a lot of people's documents and immediately turning these spaces into Jewish colonial funds, the Zionist Colonial Bank, just the Zionist Heritage Museum, like all of these things that were Ottoman in essence and reflected the identities and the culture of the indigenous population, that were then just kind of erased and written over. So all of this is happening, and we're still not at what is traditionally called the Nakba, right? Like it's still not 1948.
This is
like
pre-Nakba.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like that, to me, this is the Nakba. It's a catastrophe because it was planned for so long, and there was so much build up to it, and so much happened that led up to this thing. It wasn't just suddenly they declared Israel a state and kicked out 1 million indigenous Palestinians. This took a long time.
Ask a question. You said that the landlords were selling the land, right? All of these acres. Why were they selling the land? Were they forced to sell it? Was the price good? Like, why would they sell their land to these people?
For some of them, the price was good. The price was right.
Okay.
Like they're business people.
Okay.
Right? They don't have any connection with the peasantry, right? Like, they don't have any connection with the farmers who are tilling their land. They collect taxes. And they live their good lives. And then someone approaches them and is like, here's a lump sum of money so that you and your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren will never have to think again. They're like, okay. At this point, there was still not a fully embraced collective awareness as to what was happening, right? This was early. Like, we're talking early 1900s, like 1905, 1908, 1911. There was, even at this point, the people who are emigrating are, like I said, being welcomed with open arms. They're just fleeing prosecution. And no one...
They had no idea what was going to come, obviously.
No, not yet. Some people did. Some people did.
Okay.
But a proper collective awareness as to the fact that the rug was going to be pulled out from underneath them wasn't there quite yet. One of the earliest kind of proofs that we have of this budding awareness starts in around 1910 with the publication of a journal, a newspaper called Palestine, where these two Orthodox Christian men, actually living in Jaffa, they start this newspaper to say, yo, we don't realize it, but like something is going on here. Like these Zionists are not clean. Like they're coming in with weapons, they're coming in with money. Something is going on. There are these deals happening. And it took a minute. It took from then to about the 1930s for the first collective uprising to happen. We have the 1936 to 1939 are the years of unrest, where the Palestinians revolt against the British and the Zionists. They revolt against the British for facilitating the Zionist movement that was now starting to dig its nails in, its fangs in even deeper.
And one thing I just want to mention, because it might be obvious to somebody like you, but that some people might not know, Jews, Muslims, and Christians used to all live together on the land in
Yes,
peace. So
of course.
I think
Yeah.
that's a huge detail that some people just may not know. So please
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Holy Land is holy to all of Abraham's adherents, um, from the first to the last. So, yes, it was a majority Muslim place. The Christian and Jewish communities were smaller, but they were very much there, very much thriving. Um, there, there wasn't, interreligious violence isn't like some very big characteristic of the Holy Land before this. Like there weren't constant interreligious clashes the way that there was in Europe, you know. Christians and Jews in under Ottoman rule and under Muslim rule in general are kind of like special citizens. Like they're treated differently than, say, a full on non-believer. But that's a whole other subject. Most important thing to say is that as minority populations, they were taken care of in the Ottoman Empire. They were protected, and it wasn't like Europe, essentially. That's Europe. So, when people think of like, oh, they've been fighting forever, that's Europe. You're projecting. That's European history. That's, yeah. Anyways, um, so that first revolt we have in between 36 and 39 against the British. And after that, the Zionists are more empowered and real violence starts to happen, like big violence, like the Deir Yassin massacre and one similar to it where Zionists would just randomly, and these were militias, and these are the militias that actually the Likud party today is founded on. The IDF actually was a combination of 3 of these terror militias. They referred to themselves as terror militias. So this is not me talking smack or, saying anything that they wouldn't say themselves. Okay, they
Right.
called themselves militias of terror. So they were proud of it. So I feel like we owe it to them to call them by the name they chose. Anyways. um, so these terror militias would like enter randomly, raid villages. They would grape the women, and this was like grape was a huge tactic because people were so traditional and cultural purity was so closely tied, so enmeshed in sexual purity, specifically the sexual purity of women. So this was like, it's hard to know, even from the writing that we have left, whether people were more at the time, whether the men who were fighting for resistance or joining liberation armies and resistance armies, whether they were more upset about the loss of the land or the of the women. It's a whole conversation, right? It's really interesting. It's a whole again another tangential rabbit hole. But anyways, this started to happen more and more frequently.
I just got the
Mm,
chills. Wow, I'd never heard of it like that. Wow. Okay,
mm,
continue.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Some people fled, some people would flee out of fear that their mothers, sisters, wives, daughters would be raped. Like they would make the choice, that was a choice that the hard choice people made. Like, do we stay and fight, or do we go, because this could happen and this could be even worse than just losing. So, yeah. Um, yeah, it's a very underspoken of aspect of this struggle, but it's a very interesting one, a very rich one. Um, yeah, so that starts happening, and then 47, by 1947, these conflicts have escalated to a much larger degree until they break out into full-out war, which ends in the uh, displacement of almost 1 million indigenous Palestinians and the founding of the state of Israel, the conglomeration that becomes the IDF out of these terror armies that had done the dirty work of driving people out. And, the establishment of this thing that we know today as Israel, the Zionist entity. So, I think that's the Nakba.
Yeah,
That's one piece of it, I guess.
no, that was great. And you talked about so many things that I obviously didn't know. But I think another thing that we need to point out is that a lot of people think that this is an Islam versus Jewish struggle,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's not. So, can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, no, the people who think that it's an Islam versus Jewish struggle are, Christian. And that's you projecting, because your struggle with the Jews has been a Christian versus Jew struggle. But that's not, that's never been a thing. That's a European thing. It is as simple as projection. And all of the propaganda that has taught you to hate Islam and to fear Islam and to see Islam as this violent thing preys on your subconscious need to project what was Europe's hate of its Jews onto someone or something. Yani, the history itself, the history speaks for itself. Yani, you can open a book and read about the history of the Jews in the Muslim world, the history of Christians in the Muslim world, and that's all it would take for you to see that if if there was a problem between Muslims and Jews, wouldn't it have manifested before we intervened? Like, why did this only start when you got involved, babe? Maybe you're the drama, if you know what I mean.
We know what you mean.
Yeah.
And also, people don't realize that Muslims and Jews are closer. They're like cousins,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we use that language. I and no, in common, like, Arab folk speak. That is how Muslims refer to Jews, as our cousins. That's how it's always been. And, if anything, the Christians are the kind of more of the outsiders in that context, because they're also the other two are closer culturally and practically. Like, even in terms of development, like in terms of what these three iterations of Abrahamism are. Judaism is fundamentally based on the second law, Moses's law, right? And the direct work with God himself, the one and only God, the only one. Whereas Christianity is then the iteration that says that, there were flaws in Moses' law, and this is how we want to live moving forward. This is a new era, the New Testament, essentially. So Christianity is based on this, moving away slightly from that one God direct worship through the law of Moses into something more Greco-Romanized, almost pagan, even in its constituency, I want to say, even in the way that it's put together. Like, Christianity develops over several hundred years, right? About 300 years, until it takes the form that we know, which, has a trinity and involves Jesus being the Son of God and coming to fix things and make things right and return love to the world. And that is this, like I said, this Greco-Romanized, pagan-friendly, monotheistic iteration of there's, it's one God, but he's really three. So, the way that you used to talk about it is kind of the same. And there is a mother too. She's kind of a goddess, but she's human, but she gave birth as a virgin. So it's kind of godly. So there's kind of a goddess and there's kind of a pantheon, but it's just a trinity, but he's still at the top. And somehow this man is also connected, so there's also a demigod, Hercules style. It all fits better in a more paganized imagination, right? And it loosens things up a little bit in terms of from the first law. Then Islam happens as this revolution within Eastern Christianity that's oh, we need to go back to the one God. We've lost the way. We've reached a point where people think that God came down as a human, that God had a son. You think God would have a son? That's blasphemy. That's wild. That's nuts. We need to go back. We need to let go of this. Sure, this guy might have been a prophet. This guy was, sure, he was, might have been the Messiah, and he's a prophet, and he's revered, and he's the Word of God, and he has all this power, but he's not God himself. And God would never have a son. There's no, God isn't someone who, copulates and births people. God is the Father of all. Just, a sexless, all-powerful, all-loving, all-compassionate, all-feared, all God. So in terms of just where the starting point is, right? We're returning to a mosaic, almost a mosaic law, but in this new iteration, in this new place, in this new era, with new teachings, with new stories, with an extra two prophets, actually, given that Muhammad is the one who comes to bring all of this back as the final prophet, and Jesus is accepted as the prophet, son of Mary, Messiah, but not God himself, never crucified, only lifted up to God, alive, living and well. So when they go back to this older tradition, they obviously embrace the older practices, the several prayers a day, the staying away from the pork, the certain ritual practices in terms of when you're in the temple and how to enter the temple, and so that was a lot to say. That you can kind of see how there's Christianity becomes this more westernized outlier in these three iterations of the Abrahamics, and the two, Islam and Judaism, remain one. I mean, both more closely born and bred within Western Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, and Palestine, Jerusalem, whereas Christianity has a Greco-Romanized, mostly Greco aspect, a Greco spirit, Greco-Jewish spirit. So yeah.
Well, that was a lot, but very much needed and explained wonderfully. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit and talk about global consciousness. What is global consciousness?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I guess I would say just an awareness of the world we live in, our positionality in it, beyond just the borders of our passports, designated area, or our religious upbringing or cultural upbringing, I guess. Something broader than just me, more than just who am I, but who am I in this world? What is this world that I am a part of?
Do you have an answer for that? What is this world that we are a part of?
A mess, truly a mess, I would say.
Yeah, I feel, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit. Really feel like we're fighting a spiritual war, like good versus evil. And, I'm very naive. I want to believe that everyone is good but there's a lot of bad people in this world. And I hope that the good will win. But do you feel like we're fighting the spiritual war of good versus evil?
Um, I I definitely think that there is a spiritual war
Okay.
uh at play. I don't know that it's between good versus evil, only because you're right to think that everyone is good, but everyone is also evil. And what we mean by those things and what those words represent, and when we get to say we embody one or the other, shifts so frequently that I think they're impossible to ever capture because the, let's say, Zionist, Israeli today who goes to war, goes to Gaza to fight, believes, most of them believe truly that what they're doing is good. What they're doing is protecting their land, protecting their people, protecting their right to exist, protecting their culture. They don't know that in our eyes we are seeing evil. They don't know. They they just don't know. They've never been told based on what they've been taught and everything they've been raised on, from the books to the movies to the schooling to their parents, their friends. Everything has told them that this is the enemy. This is evil. In fact, these children are evil because they will grow up with a bloodlust for you, for your life. So it couldn't be evil to starve them or kill them. It must be a necessary evil for the greater good. It must be. And that could be said by anyone, anywhere, who moves with conviction. The Christians, the early Christians, European Christians who would massacre Jews for killing Jesus, for rejecting Jesus. To them, they were defending Jesus. And that is good because Jesus is good and Jesus deserves to be defended. And if it weren't for them, everyone would be Christian and the world would be beautiful. But because they don't want to accept Jesus, everything is bad. So the answer is eradicate the people who won't accept Jesus. That's good. Right? Like, so good and evil are just these very fickle categories that I think a lot of the narratives that we have been exposed to have been feeding us this precarious good versus evil, bad guy versus good guy, hero versus villain, so that we don't realize just how complex these situations and all conflict is, and how it really rests on how much we're willing to consider the other as worthy of life and dignity and respect as we are. So, like, for example, in older mythologies, like we are raised, especially in this Abrahamic world, we are raised within the dichotomy, within this duality of good and evil, God and the devil. But before that, you had gods and you had humans. And the gods were all-powerful, almighty, all-seeing, all-knowing, but they also had flaws. Specifically, they had all of the flaws that humans had, just on a super level. So they were also all jealous, all angry, all grapey. And humans were flawed in their own ways. Humans had hubris. Humans dared to defy the gods or dared to challenge them. And the gods could, if they wanted, if they found, like when Athena, there is this, Ariadne is like known to be this very skilled weaver. And Athena is the goddess of weavers, so she has to be the greatest weaver of all time. And when she hears of Ariadne, she's like, oh, I'm going to challenge this bitch because she can't. She's like outdoing me. Like the women are starting to say like, wow, this is work that would like outdo Athena. No, ma'am. So she challenges her to like a weaving duel. And they weave, and everyone looks at Ariadne's thing and they're like, oh my God, like, I think Ariadne's is better. And Athena is so angry and so jealous that she punishes Ariadne for her hubris, for even daring to come and duel her in the weaving instead of just like ceding and saying, no, I would never duel you. You're a goddess. Right? So that's what the gods were like before. The gods would devour their own children if a prophecy told them that they were going to overthrow them, because they didn't want to lose their power. The gods, there was this like dialogue, if you will, between the gods or the godly divine realms and the human mortal realm. Whereas now it's all good and all evil. These are the realms. And your job is to be good because God is good and he wants you to be good. And that's it. It's as simple as that. It's not a question of hubris. It's not a question of skill. It's not a question of what decisions you will make and how much you will honor the humanness of someone in front of you, the worthiness of someone in front of you. It's just good and bad. We are good, the Zionists are bad. For them, they are good and Arabs are bad. Luke Skywalker is good and
Dark Vader.
Dark Vader is bad, right? Although, like, there is a lot to say about Star Wars and the fact that Darth Vader turns out to be his father to kind of like embody, reintegrate good and evil into one another. Like, ultimately, this good guy is actually the son of evil. But anyways, whole other alchemical discussion. Um, but yeah, I think the spiritual war is not a good versus evil. That is our personal internal war. Our desire to be good is what our mishpas even desire, our dedication to being good, the fact that we've been brainwashed into thinking that goodness is the ultimate thing that we could be. Good. That's what we should be. Good girls and good boys and do the right thing and follow the rules and blah 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 blah. That creates more division than it does union, because everybody's version of good is different. Every moment your own version of good is going to change. It's not good for you to hit people. But if you are a mother and somebody comes near your child, you're not going to think twice about beating someone up. Like, you're just, and does that make you evil? Like, are you now evil? Because according to your values, violence is bad. So what you just did is not good. But, right? So it just doesn't hold up. It's a very, very faulty, fragile, precarious framework that has us locked in really deep. And it just polarizes us, because what I think is good is different from what you think is good. And we're both arguing from a place where we believe we represent the good and the morally righteous, but no one really does. There's no actual encoded morality within the nature of life, within creation. She hasn't encoded that the predator is evil and the prey is good. She has encoded that one creature will be a prey and another creature will be a predator, and this is how they will sustain themselves. And each one will have to adapt according to its circumstances. That is how nature has set us up. So our war is with, I think, the spiritual war is with like, we've been severed from our deeper spiritual essence, our deeper spiritual awareness that stretches beyond moral righteousness, that stretches deeper than moral righteousness into understanding, into compassion, into a recognition of our mutual necessity for one another and our interconnectedness. All of that is muffled beneath good versus evil, this polarity, this good, these two separated things. So the war is in keeping that part muffled, keeping Jerusalem split in half, let's say, while, we're all just convinced that, like, this is good and this is bad, and these people are evil and we are the good guys, and the good guys always win, and no, they don't. No.
Well, you talk about compassion, but it's so difficult to have compassion for certain people. And I struggle with that. And I'm always like, and then my sister's like, you can't. And my sister's kind of like you, like, she meditates, she's like keeping the peace. And she's like, you can't fight hate with hate. You have to fight it with love. And I'm like, it's very difficult to love certain people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally feel you. And compassion doesn't have to mean love, and love doesn't have to mean chillness. Sometimes love is shame. Sometimes love is anger. Sometimes love is violence. Sometimes there isn't, and you don't fight hate with hate, but no, kamena, no, I'm not like a big turn the other cheek guy, and no mission, no. And no, sometimes somebody needs just a little smack across the face. Like, today I know Arabic as well as I do, because every now and again, if I didn't follow like what my mom wanted me to do and speak Arabic at home, you got a little smack across the face, and it sits with you. It's a little violent. It's a little aggressive. It's not fun in the moment, but it sticks. It stuck with me. The way that evolutionarily, the things that have hurt us, the things that have had the most profound impact on our emotional, physical, psychological lives are what have contributed to our evolution. We only strive for more when there's a little bit of pain. There's a little bit more that we need. There's just not enough. And that's when we will try to strive for more. That's when we'll try to do better. So yeah.
This has been so enlightening. My
Also,
goodness.
though, this is not like to endorse abuse. If you're being abused, physically, mentally, emotionally, seek help. I'm talking about like a small smack, like not even across the face. It was mostly on like the back of my hand. Like, don't you, like it wasn't. It's not. I'm not endorsing abuse. Okay.
I know you're not, but we live in that world that we have to like
To say
clarify
that,
and,
yeah, I have to say that because
yeah,
our critical thinking skills at this point, right? Well,
Mafi.
we're not reading enough. We're We're not reading enough. Yeah.
Mafi critical thinking in
Mm-mm.
today's world. Um, the time went by really fast.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked a
And
lot.
I think we might have to do a part two um, eventually because there are other things I want to talk about. But I got to end with the question I end all of my interviews with, which is because this is a podcast about the Middle East, the MENA region, Arabs. What is one lasting message that you would like to leave the West with about either Arabs or the region?
I guess like just something that we talked about before, like, you know, and this is directed towards the Western audience. Like, we know everything about y'all, but you don't really know much about us. Like we've been watching, but you haven't. And just know that the fact that you haven't and the fact that you don't know uh, is what allows a lot, if not all of this violence and all of this horrendous stuff that's happening to our homelands. It allows it to continue. You don't know about us because it is in the vested interest of people in power that you don't know about us or about really anybody else outside your borders. So the greatest revolutionary act that you can do is to look outside your borders, to look towards us, look towards all of us, towards the other. Because, the ignorance is it's what's creating all this violence. It's not your fault. It's literally like it's built this way. It's designed this way. So the greatest revolutionary act you can do against this design, against the matrix, if you want to escape the matrix, is to literally look outside it. Just look outside. Like, we are here. We're right here. So, yeah.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I love your energy. It's just like
Thank
so.
you.
And I feel like I know you. It's very weird because
Well,
sometimes I'm like super, I don't know. This has just been a wonderful experience. That's what I want to say.
thank you. Yeah, no, I feel you. We're soul
Yeah.
sisters now.
Yes, we totally are. You are part of my tribe. And Elianne, where can people find you? Oh, wait. You are coming out with an alchemy course.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
we can give like a quick little synopsis, I guess is the word, of what it is, just so if people are interested.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a alchemy is what happens after healing, after therapy, right? Because so many of us do a lot of therapy and we're obsessed with healing today. I actually just wrote about this yesterday. we're obsessed with like healing and therapy, but like I feel everyone is starting to reach this um plateau where it's just like fashionable to be, doing the work and to like constantly quote your therapist. Like my therapist told me this, and when I told my therapist that, they did this and da da da. And healing is talked about as this like end goal, like I'm healed or I'm not healed or you're not healed and you need to be healed and you need healing. And um, I think that even though these modern modalities, like therapeutic modalities, uh, have genuine benefits, like they do help us return to like baseline functioning. We can process our trauma, we can do inner child work, we can manage symptoms, we can develop better coping strategies. Ultimately, it's still designed around like pathology and survival, restoration for survival, rather than expansion.
Right.
So, um, so many of us in the healing space and the spiritual space are we end up in this very self-indulgent, self-recursive place of like we're just healing, we're constantly healing, we're constantly learning more about ourselves, we're so self-aware, we're so self-understanding. Oh my god, there's still more about me to learn, da 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 da. Whereas uh and I don't think we realize that that obsession with personal healing has come at the expense of soul making, of establishing or developing that global consciousness that we talked about. When we're always asking the question, how can I feel better? We forget to ask, how can I make someone else feel better today? Who who am I? But more importantly, who am I in this world? And what does this world need from me? Now that I am healed, what do I have to offer to the world I'm in? What is this world I'm in? And how can I be of service to it? Now, alchemy is, I think, the missing framework in this equation, because alchemy has a process map that extends into those spaces beyond just healing and learning about yourself and personal development. It also extends into integration and wisdom from experience and offering, creation, collaboration, global consciousness. So in Alchemy 101, we essentially together um, go on this journey through the alchemical process, from beginning from ourselves and our shadows, honoring healing. I'm not saying healing isn't important or therapy isn't important, or we should rush those stages, but we also shouldn't get stuck there and obsessed with that healing process, because shadow work, what we call shadow work now, is in alchemy just stage one. It's nigredo, and it's followed by albedo, that purification of insights and the beginning of what is called healing, where most people stop. And it's after that, after healing, in citrinitas, that we integrate and generate wisdom and start to teach and learn from others. And then in rubedo, when we actually mine the gold out of ourselves and offer it to the world rather than hoard it. So it's almost like everyone in these healing spaces today, like, okay, they're mining their gold, but they're hoarding it. We're just mining gold so that we can put it in a vault. You're supposed to offer the gold up to the world. Like go see where this gold fits in the world, bruv. Learn about the world. See what you're a puzzle piece at the end of the day. You're just gonna lie out in the sun by yourself. Like, go be part of the puzzle. And that's what alchemy is. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in alchemy. So, if you want to join, the applications are open now.
Okay.
There's also a free mini course, like an alchemy gateway, to just introduce you to these stages that I described and help you figure out which stage you're in and what tools you can use to go to the next stage, like where you're moving on to next. Like there's a self-assessment and a workbook and stuff like that. So yeah.
So can somebody, because I'm thinking of a friend right now, specific friend, if somebody's like in the initial stages of healing, would this be good
Mm.
for her?
Oh, amazing.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
I will
Because like I
definitely
said,
tell.
it definitely, like the first two stages honor that the healing process. Nigredo is the longest part. It's the most difficult part. The actual getting through to the healing. But it just doesn't end there. It keeps going with you. You have more steps to take beyond healing. Healing is just the beginning. Especially in the world today, we need people who are ready to go beyond healing and into the collective healing. We need to take our individual healing and allow it to contribute to the collective healing and collective liberation. So
Trying with this podcast. It's my little,
I think you definitely are. Like this is your rubedo, this is your offering, your
yeah,
creation.
yeah,
So
for the global
yeah,
consciousness.
yeah, 100%,
I love
100%.
it. Okay, so really quick, top social medias, what are
Yeah.
they?
Twitchy Witch on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Also Twitchy Witch on Substack. The Substack is called Phantasmagasma. And I think that's it. I think that's all my social media. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah.
Perfect. Elianne, it's been amazing. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for your time. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on. And for all of you out there, please like, subscribe, follow, share, comment. And I know that most of you who are watching are not subscribers on YouTube. 97% to be specific. So please subscribe to the channel if you like it. It would, help me a lot. I'm trying to bring people together for the global consciousness. So I would appreciate the follow, the like, the comment, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye.